the screen, but this is real us. I've got a red rectangle in the upper left-hand corner that tells me that I've been talking for nearly 15 seconds. So now it's your turn. And both of you, I hope Ansel will be back in a moment. I think something tossed him aside for a moment. Yes, wonderful, wonderful. Well, both of you already know Scott. I'm not going to pull him onto the screen, but I tell you, he is pulling all the levers behind the screen to make each of these happen. And since there's about 50 weeks in a year, and I'm almost at the point of my 3rd year anniversary doing this each Monday, used to be a different day. So that means that I'm around episode 150. Wow. So he's had to listen to me. Yes, congratulations. I did ask my husband, do you want me to find someone else? And he's like, no, I can still produce the show. I can still make sure that your links appear on screen. And I'm like, great. And then he finds Craig, and then he tells me about Ansel, or Ansel tells me about my husband. And I'm going, hey, he really has been listening to me during that time. But it's okay, if he's answering messages or, thinking about the next meeting he's going to have when this is over. That's okay too. But Craig, you appeared first. So here's your big chance to introduce yourself to Ansel and really to me as well. And let us know, were you on Scott's show that's actually based in Oregon, or his co-host is in Oregon? Is that how he sent you my direction?
Well, thanks, Christine. I do appreciate it. And Ansel, it's good to see you. And Scott, thanks for having us on and everything. So I met you through Scott through another discussion we were having about AI in general. So my name is Craig Tucker. I'm the creator and founder of Vern AI. It's a real-time emotion recognition system. It's used by tens of thousands of people worldwide in award-winning customer service and mental health applications. We do work within elder space, dementia, Alzheimer's, mental health, triage, and therapy as well. So we've been around for a number of years, and my background is research at Michigan State University. Our technology has a couple patents, and as far as aging, not only is that my why, I got into this because my grandfather had died. My grandma, being alone, had no companion. So I dove into the the research and science as to how can we make a good companion for grandma, being the good grandson, right? So I found that the sentiment analysis was not very accurate, that all the other models they were using currently were not able to achieve the goal. So we set aside, we set on the path and the journey to be able to solve it. And we think we have, and so our product has been used in several different applications across the world. And so we consider ourselves experts in the emotions, how they change as we age. It's very interesting stuff. And this is a great topic that we're really interested in.
I'm glad. First of all, I'm glad that AI exists and is being used, because it is a tool. It is more accurate than I could ever be. And I had to take very specific notes on the clients where I served in their homes, so that both the agency that I was employed by, and so that the next person, the next hired caregiver that might come their way, perhaps we were crossing shifts, or maybe they weren't going to come for 2 or 3 days, was aware that, you know, there was enough milk in the fridge, or that they were complaining about and complaining in the right way, really, about something that didn't feel right, so that if it was talked about again, we would have some record of that. You know, just all those things. And AI can just be less distracted or not distracted at all, and isn't assigning its own emotion to what is going on. And I'm I have a question,
Sure.
but Ansel, I want to make sure that you know that you can ask anything that you want. Just it's hard to get my attention sometimes, because right now I'm looking at you guys. So I'm usually up here looking at this, and try as I may, I tend to stare at that because I feel like I'm just looking into the pupil of one person that's in our audience right now, who may not be putting in comments because they're busy being a caregiver, they're busy driving. They are listening while they eat lunch at their desk, while they're still tapping away on other things, but they love to hear information that's going to help them, maybe help their family. But do something to get my attention, you know, like flashlights or something. Can Vern AI, has there been a specific effort towards recognizing emotions when the person has a particular diagnosis, a neurological change, anything from forgetfulness to not being able to process what's going on enough to speak about it, just like it is with little babies. They're, you know, you're just like, what is the crying about? Are they scared? Are they hungry? And you go through the whole list of what it could be. It used to be check the diaper to see if a pin has opened. And maybe it still is. I really don't know if people are still using diaper pins, but not to say that a person with dementia has that. But if you're in the hospital and they've got a tube down your throat and someone asks you a complicated question, you're like, I don't know sign language. And they're asking me a question that they're giving me a yes and no. Blink twice for this, blink once for that. And it's really not a yes or no answer. I don't know how to respond. And they go, oh, you just don't want to talk about it right now. It's like, no, you need to ask a question differently. And that is true of people going through dementia neurological changes. How's Vern AI doing with that?
So that's a great question, and so that everybody knows is that the emotions that we communicate to one another, we intend to. So we've evolved the process of being able to detect and send these emotions because it's helped us as a species survive. It's been one way in which these naked apes with very little defense mechanism can conquer the entire Earth is because we went from having one mind and through communication and language, the ability to string those minds together and to create problem solving and communication that far outweighs the effort of one individual. So we very much evolved these methodologies in which to communicate how we feel, and which is basically how we relate to the world around us and to one another. And so we have all gained the skills from the times we're babies to recognize language, to recognize expressions, to recognize audio changes. And so this is what we call in our world a multimodal. So the multimodal detection looks at all of them. And ironically, and something I didn't know when I started and was a big time myth that was busted, is that, you know, they say 94% of your emotions are communicated non-verbally. That's actually not true, and it comes from a Seinfeld episode. It's Cosmo Kramer about silence. I am not kidding. So it's interesting how these myths can enter into the lexicon,
Yes.
right? It is, and and what we found is that the majority of emotional information is communicated through the language, the actual words we use. And I do an exercise that I often do with people I speak with in college courses or large audiences, where I actually ask people what they think is the primary method of emotion distribution. Is it language? Is it audio? Is it nonverbal, like uh, facial expressions, body language? And then usually everybody picks the first two. I mean, hardly anybody ever picks language. And then I have the unfortunate but sometimes fun job of telling them they're wrong, as I was, because that's what I thought too when I dumped into this. But it's actually quite the opposite, that the language is the way in which we categorize and label our world, and which we communicate with one another. If we did not have shared understanding, language would have no value and no purpose. So, and I can give a good example, is I usually ask them to turn to the person to the right, tell them they love them very much, you want to spend the rest of their life with them, but they can only use facial expressions and body language. And then watch hilarity ensue as they try to do that without the words. Then I ask them to turn to their left and actually tell the person that they're sorry their grandma has died and their most deepest sincere condolences, but they can only use vocal tones and inflections. And besides turning into a bunch of room full of Tim Allens and Home Improvement, where they're just grunts and groans, right, that kind of stuff, they realize quickly that it is actually the words that we use that is the most important vehicle in which we communicate our emotions. And so our system is basically detects that. We found that we play a game with one another, and that was very important to our methodology, and that we can detect these little latent emotional clues that we do share intentionally with one another. So like in the instance of like Alzheimer's or dementia, setting up a baseline and actually tracking longitudinally how people communicate, the words they communicate with, the emotions they communicate, can be tracked over time. So there can be a temporal component, right? So let's say that Christine has talks to one of our conversational AIs through a whole set conversation that's allowed there to get benchmarks and milestones and to detect answers in a way that doesn't require you to fill out a survey, right? It's just talking to you. Create a baseline in which they can then get a good idea of how you emote, because one of the things we found, and we haven't proven yet, but we're on the way to, is an emotional fingerprint, where people just like the language they use in everyday life. The reason why the FBI called it Unabomber is because there's languages that everybody runs back to and habit forming. And this is very true with emotional content. So we have the ability to then track these things over time. You can see in real time if there's agitation, if there's an increase in fear, which is obviously a big component of Alzheimer's dementia, and with other type of mental health instances that we're looking at. So long term, you can actually track this in time. We're building AI agents as well, from all the way from like voice agents to 3D avatars that I could build that literally don't look any different from you and I, and you can hardly tell our AI, to extract that information to have interactions with, and then from there you can use that information for a whole host of things.
Wow. It is your grandmother, has she ever used it?
Unfortunately, no. She passed too before we were actually able to get the product out to the market. So she tried some early tests, and Vern was his name, so that's his legacy we're carrying forward.
That's why. The Vern had to come from somewhere, and I didn't know if it was an acronym.
It's an acronym too. It works. A Virtual Emotion Resource Network.
Okay.
It was the whole idea was to honor some of my forefathers and mothers, and unfortunately, my grandpa Dick was not going to work for obvious reasons.
No, oh, you're kidding. Oh my goodness. Well, okay. So you've touched on very important things. Seinfeld, Tim Allen, Unabomber. It really, you heard it here, folks. It is possible that in the future that people will, for their, I don't know, 18th birthday, 21st birthday or something, have their emotional language analyzed and imprinted so that they can rule you out as the person who just did that thing. And it's like, no. We know, instead of whatever lie detectors, whatever all they do. And we've seen in movies how you get around them by creating a crisis where there isn't one and
Mhm.
responding that way and all this.
They're not even allowed in court even.
Oh, lie detector results.
Not allowed in court.
Oh, because everyone watched the movies and knows how to get around them.
Well, part of that, they're based on a technology called galvanic skin response. It basically checks when you get sweaty. So any arousal state, and then we're not talking sexual arousal, although it is part of it. Not
But like flight and fight.
Yeah,
and,
arousal
yeah.
can be you're primed, right? Your eyes all dilated, your pupils, you've got adrenaline flowing. You're primed for some kind of an action. So yeah, I mean, you can track some things, but other things that they don't really exist.
Wow. And what's more emotion impactful than knowing that you're part of something that happened, or that you are a suspect, or that, so you're already.
You're already nervous, right? Exactly. And there's a lag behind the actual the signal and the detection, right? So it takes a few milliseconds for the signal transfer from the brain to the nerve endings that actually control the sweating. So you're a lagging indicator. You might be tagging something that could be back, and that's been problematic. And then the accuracy is really not there. So it's been 60% ish for its whole career as a methodology. So the whole lie detector thing is kind of funny because it doesn't work. In fact, they tell you if you're guilty, take one, because then people will believe. If you pass it, you crow about it. If you're guilty, no one knows about it, and people take that as a sign of innocence when really it's not. The best way to look at these responses is to do something which is practically impossible. Is to look in the brain at what's called the bold response, and that's done through magnetic resonance imaging, fMRI specifically.
Mm-hmm.
And really, they are looking at the immediate signals that happen in the brain when blood gets sent to a certain region, and that's done through thought, and it's done to enact pathways. And so neuroscience can actually see some of this, but you'd have to have somebody sitting in, a CAT scan, an MRI machine, and that's just not practical to put
when they're on the witness stand or something.
Yes, exactly. Now you
Not
see the
practical.
problem. You can do it in the lab in very select set of circumstances, but it's impractical in the field.
Well, and then it's medical, and there I go again. My blood and my neurons and everything are just kind of like, it's not going to be a relaxing, but maybe Vern gets you when you're so completely relaxed and you're just talking and gathering information and maybe a little bit entertained or something like that. And so, and like you said, a baseline of all that. So you talked about something that made me remember that a couple weeks ago at church. Here's this tiny baby. There's like all this thick hair and this little tiny person. And so I did what I know the response is, and I put my hand in front of my face. I didn't say anything for a moment. And then I pulled it away. And this baby that had just been doing was going, because my face went away and my voice. Mm-hmm. And then it came back, and then it's all, oh, you're back, and bubbles and everything just come out again. So we definitely want someone to interact with. And I like AI because I know that TV is satiating and makes a person feel not so alone, but you really can't interact with it. You can say stuff to the TV. You can say, no, don't do that. No, it's going to, it happens every time, because it does happen every time. Every time they do that, something goes wrong and it falls off, and, hilarity ensues. But with AI, as it's learning you and then asks you something different or something a little more significant to you, it's like, wow, fascination. And I love the idea of someone using both sides of their brain. They're like, now remember, this is just a technological apparatus. And then the other side that's going, what would I do if I had those ingredients right now? What would I cook? And they've suggested this, but I don't really like those spices. So if I made it this way, because a lot of people tell me that they go to AI and say, I see this, this, this in the fridge and pantry. What can I make? And it has nothing to do with loneliness or being housebound or not being able to problem solve. It's just fun. So, and it's faster than Google. When you Google up what can be made with these things, you got to get past the advertisements that are being put at the top and then finally get down and like, oh no, now they've stuck another thing in the middle of my recipe. And you don't have to scroll down so far when you're using AI. So, Ansel, I credit my husband for making me pronounce your name correctly. And then you have the steward's life.
Mm-hmm.
I worked for a Mennonite village in Oregon. And there's three things. I cannot remember the third one right now, but one was self-determination. And that is a cornerstone or a pillar of the Mennonite way of doing things, of being self-determined. And another one is stewardship. And I tell you, they did not build a new nursing home until they had enough money to get it built. They didn't have all the money that they needed to put in the new beds or whatever, but they didn't do it until they got to the point where they knew they would not have to stop partway through, that they were not going to be scrambling to, guilt people into giving more money or making promises that they couldn't keep to people. They knew that it would take 3 to 4 years to build this. And, it was very, very intentional. And we who were being sent sometimes into that village, which was acres and acres and acres. And most of the time I was being sent to the community in 2 different counties. I was to apply that to the people that I served. I was usually brought in after a crisis. Maybe the family caregiver got a sprained wrist trying to help this person up and down. Maybe family noticing so many changes that they thought we're going to have to be here 24/7, whatever the situation. I was to apply it to my client to make sure that they retained their self-determination, which was a good learning thing for me because I wanted to just fix things and be efficient. And it was much better when I was the butler or I was an extension of their arms, their feet, their voice to accomplish something so that they were doing it with me. And then being a steward, the way that I treated their household, their possessions, what was going on with, that I was making sure that if the nutritionist said way less salt, that I was stewarding that information for them and saying things like, it doesn't taste the same as Kraft. Or the way that Paul Newman made his salad dressings. Nevertheless, it is supposed to help with some of what we know is going on medically. So if you'll be patient with me, I will try some other flavors to get this to have the joy that we get from salt and the way that it brings flavors into our mouth. I'll do my best if you can just be patient with me. And so I was a steward of information. I was a steward of their privacy, their dignity, their things that happened in the home that I just did not need to explain to anyone. And when people said, ew, what do you have to do? I don't think I could do what you do. And I'm like, yes, you could absolutely do what I do because I restore humanity, whatever you would do for yourself, so that you go, oh, I feel human again. And maybe it's listening to music, maybe it's being a little bit cleaner, maybe it's participating in some sort of table activity, whatever it is. I said, what you would do for yourself, you can have empathy for that person. It just restores their humanity for you to do that, rather than talk about sundry, what do I do that maybe someone else is going, ew, we don't want, I could never do that. I would recoil. So I like that you have the steward's life. I'm guessing that it's more financial, and we didn't handle their finances, but we definitely handled maybe phone calls and things like that for them that were valuable to them and would affect their future. How we handled relationships with maybe 4 or 5 different adult children who had 4 or 5 different ways of approaching what was going on in later life. So yeah, stewardship.
Yeah, and so you mentioned a few things. Well, first off, I am the author of The Steward's Life, and there it is. Oh, it's burning it.
Yeah, put it right in front of you. That fixes it.
So yeah, I'm the author of that, and you can find out the information at thestewardslife.com. I'm sure we'll have the links somewhere. But yeah, so I'm a former Army officer, retired, and and now I'm a financial advisor, public speaker, and author. And this message is important to me, stewardship. You talked a little bit about it, and I liked that you used the word intentional, which is very important for stewardship, because you have to be intentional about it. That's what it's all about. And then you mentioned, stewarding information, stewarding resources, information, things like that. And that's exactly what it is. It's stewardship is when you're entrusted with someone by something, by somebody, and you take care of it as if it's your own. And you take that. So like that information that you were given, you took care of that. You kept the privacy. You did those kinds of things for, the good of yourself and the clients. And I focus on stewardship from, everything that we're given is given to us by God. And so we as stewards take care of those things. And, so that's really what stewardship is all about. And The Steward's Life, this book does hit a lot on finances. Obviously, that's the world I live in. I spent some time where I was a pastor and a financial advisor at the same time, wearing 2 hats. And so I've seen both worlds. I've seen kind of the financial advising world, where money is king and it's all about, the dollars and the cents and making it grow. And then I've seen the pastoral side where, it's more obviously spiritually focused and everything. And it was hard to bring the two together because, there's a lot of stigma around money and religion. It's hard to bring the two together, but they actually do need to be together, because the best way to handle our resources is to steward them biblically. And, that's not going to be flashy. That's not going to be the greatest new trick of the trade or whatever, but it's what works. It's what's steady. It's what's worked for years. And my book, The Steward's Life, I have a tagline on it: faithful with little, trusted with much. And to me, it's more about, being faithful with what we're given. And once we are faithful with what we're given, we can be trusted with more. And that's where the growth comes from. And so when I approach finances with a client, we're talking about stewarding it, using it in a smart way, growing it, of course, but also making sure that the money is used appropriately as a tool, rather than seeing, a lot of people hear of thing about money being evil. It's actually the love of money is the root of all evil.
Yeah.
So it's the love of it. You can love it. You can use a tool and not love it. I don't love my hammer when I hammer a nail, but it does the work for me.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of how I view money. It's a tool. And if we view it that way, use it that way, it can benefit us. And from the time when I was a pastor and a financial advisor, 90% of the problems that people face, they would come to me for counseling or, therapy or whatever. 90% of the time, it was something financially related. Oh, we can't pay our bills. We're fighting. Why are you fighting? Because of the stress of the bills, getting laid off from work, jobs, so forth, so forth. Both people having to work to pay the bills. Finances creates a lot of strife in our life. So stewarding is really about all of our resources. I really consider it, faith, finances, fitness, even, and family. We steward all of these things. This book specifically about finances, but I am looking to expand on that with another book in the future and talk more about the other resource areas as well.
Wow. So I now have 3 favorite financial people that I only know on screen. I could actually meet you, I guess, in person. What city do you live in?
Waco.
This one. In Waco. Okay, I'm going to meet you in person. Absolutely. In fact, there's stuff coming. Are you going to 1,000 Friends of Waco? Anyway.
No, but I will.
It's out at Main Event Wednesday, but you have to register because they feed you. You were there when? When?
I was there last night. We had a networking thing there.
Oh, at Main Event.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, this will be my first time in there. I am not leaving you out, Craig. So sorry. But what it all boiled down to me was you and these 2 accountants make themselves available for talking about emotions. See how I am bringing this together? Talk about emotions, talk about goals, talk about what you're worried about, talk about that time that money served you so well. I mean, the little and the more are comparison, what you had, what you have now, and also the comparison with, how much can that money do? When a friend and I separately had heard about a mission to go on, and I'd never been on a mission, and I was turning 40, and it was supposed to be to orphanages in Romania. I came to her with $5 from a lady in our church, and I said, we have the widow's mite. Now I know we're going to have enough money, because it wasn't the $5. It was the blessing of that lady who had lived all these years, who said, I want Heather and Christine to be able to go to a place I've never been, be with people I'll never meet, and just, speak life into them. And I'm like, we have the widow's mite, because that's from a story that that Jesus is saying, it isn't how tall the pile of gold coins is. Did she just give everything that she could give? And I feel like this gal, oh my goodness, $5 25 years ago for a person who'd been on a fixed income forever, possibly had medical things that she had to pay for, probably a zillion grandchildren and great grandchildren, trying to give them gifts. And she could have just said, I can't spare anything for these 2 ladies that I say hi to on Sundays. So that's what I enjoy hearing about those other 2 accountants. It's the, oh my goodness, I've got so many networking things going through my mind right now. The one we go to on Fridays, Scott, you're going to have to put it. One Friday a month, it is the global tea break. There we go. One Friday a month, global tea break. It's totally virtual, and it is people around the world that show up. Sometimes they show up at 1 a.m. where they are. And two of these accountants that are just like, I'm in it for the conversation. Someone will talk to me, and we hardly touch on a spreadsheet or subtract or add. We talk about what that money did, what they would like to achieve, what they don't want to do because they don't want to love money. Not too long ago, it really stuck with me. Do you use people to love things more, or do you use things to love people more? I just had to make sure that I said it right. And I'm just like, ooh, that is important, because I bet you some people love their hammer or whatever tool it is. They love their car. They love their, I had a front porch full of flowers, and I loved it because people would just walk by and go, I love the flowers on your front porch. And I'd be like, thank you. Yes, I choose the right ones for the sunny side of I just loved it, but I didn't want to use it. I didn't want to love it above the people that were actually saying something nice or something, whatever.
Yeah.
So you wrote a book, but you want to write another one. So go ahead and.
Yeah. So, this message of this actual message of the finances, it actually probably, it was in my heart during this time when I was a pastor and a financial advisor both. And so it weighed on me, and that's why that kind of came first. But really, again, the stewardship thing to me is bigger, because throughout my time in ministry in the Army, it's always stuck to me that, we live in a world that's very distracting. We have stuff that pulls us everywhere, both good and bad. Movies, TV, TikToks, there's just so much that you can spend your time on, which, speaking of time, that it's actually our greatest resource, because we all have the same amount of it, and stewarding time is probably actually the most important thing to steward. But that kind of expands upon it. So yeah, I definitely want to take the message. When I wrote this, and I kind of sat on it for a year or two, and then recently my wife's been going through some health issues. We just had a baby 9 months ago. And as you can tell by my gray, I'm not the youngest guy. And my wife's the same age as I am. But we just had a baby 9 months ago. Our third one, we have a 25-year-old, a 24-year-old, and a 9-month-old now. And we started going through some health issues and everything. So while she was in some of her infusion treatments and everything, I had spare time. And, obviously when you're going through things, you grow closer to God. And so during that time, I was like, I'm going to finish this book. I'm going to get this message out. So I wrote it, and it's a short book. It's not a long read. I didn't want it to be. I meant for it to be something that someone could get, scan through. I've had several people tell me, hey, I got your book and I read it in one day, which is fine, because that's what I want them to do. They read it, they absorbed it, and they started applying it to their lives. And that's what my intent was with that. And then so, obviously, because this one is kind of like I would call it a quick guide or maybe a field manual kind of thing. So I want to expand on that in the future, because I feel like there's much more to stewardship than what I covered in these pages.
Do you know, I blew it. Was it your wife or your baby daughter that was going through the medical?
Oh, it's my wife. My daughter is actually, she's like a little terror.
Okay, that sounds healthy.
Well,
but I'm so sorry that your wife was going through.
Yeah, there was something with the pregnancy, autoimmune condition. Don't want to get into all the details and everything, but
no.
She's been limited mobility wise and having infusion treatments, which is, what's given me some spare time to write this. And it actually took me out of the distractions of the world, so I could focus on the message, which is kind of what through the message I want to help other people do, is kind of quiet down some of the things of the world and be more intentional about their stewardship.
Wow. Yep. Establishing a rhythm, having a way of living that doesn't have SOS. This is my thing, is shiny object syndrome. Like, oh, what's that? A diversion. That's, in fact, I think in Romania, they would say diversion. And what they meant was like a movie or a play or a musical performance or something like that. And they had been through it with being conquered so many times through the centuries. And at the very end, at that point, a dictator named Ceausescu, who was described to us as a person that was extremely paranoid, and that's why people kept getting executed. They still had bullet holes sprayed across buildings, etc., from all the uprisings and all the everything. He had been put down and literally strung up. Only 10 years. So the people that we were meeting were either children who had somewhat memories, but most of them, the people we had conversations with, still behaved as if they were being watched and they might be suspect, the way that they acted. And the reason why we learned that was that Heather and I said, we feel like we kind of look like the other people. And yet people seem to just walk right up to us and say, oh, where are you from? Sorry, English not very good, or whatever. Even if we're just walking down the street and we're not talking loudly, we don't think people are listening to us speaking American. And the response was, you're swinging your arms. You're speaking loud enough to be heard. You're looking back and forth. Goodness sakes, you're taking pictures. We know that you're a tourist, but you could be from another part of our country. But you are bringing attention to yourself in the way that you dress that happens to be very different than we do. And I'm like, I don't think so. And they're like, you're wearing man belts. And I tell you, all the 25 years ago, all the girl shorts had cuffs and pleats and pockets front and back and loops. And we had on these big leather belts, and it just wasn't part of it. You dressed as a woman. You kept your mouth small. You look down when you speak, and you hang on to each other while you walk down the street. That is a way of relating. They said you will see two men holding hands with each other. You will see an adult woman and a teenage boy holding hands with each other. That has not so much to do with their love for each other, because they may be only getting to know each other, but that is a way of communicating and saying we've got each other as we walk down the street, as people are just standing there with their guns slung over their back. And so, Ansel, you were in the military, and then you were out, and you were a pastor. You were and are in finances and stewardship. Did some of that overlap? Because when you're in the military, it is a culture. Yeah. And then you come out here and you say, no one's going to tell me what to do today. I am an adult. I have a good working brain, but this is just different. Mm-hmm. And so I wondered if, like my dad, he was in the Army and they put him right into being a chaplain's assistant because he could direct music. He could play a little on the piano. He could play all sorts of brass instruments. He had been in a musical group, and he was accustomed to expressing himself up in front of a group as they traveled around the United States to advertise the college that he went to, etc. And they're like, perfect, you're going to be a chaplain's assistant in Germany. So did those two overlap in any way?
I mean, throughout my time in the military, because I went into the military pretty young. I was 20 when I did, and I always had a little bit of a faith background, and always had, a strong faith. And as we moved throughout, with the military, we would attend church where we were and so forth, and get involved as we could. But really, the military was the main focus. It has to be when you're in it. It really does consume most of your time with, especially with deployments, things like that. But I would work closely with chaplains, knew a lot of chaplains assistants, things like that. And then 10 years ago, I retired. I was retired medically, kind of came as a surprise, but went through the process, and I had to figure out what I was going to do when I grew up. And so, I found the financial world and kind of got into that. But at the same time, I had my faith, and I started attending a local church, and the pastor there, needed assistance, and, encouraged me to get my license and everything, which I did. And then eventually he retired, and I took over the church. Did that for about 4 years. And, but then, work again kind of pulled me away from that, and had to give up the church and everything. So I pastored for about 4 years. So there's a little bit of overlap as far as like things that I did. I mean, but I wasn't, involved in the spiritual world in the military directly, if you will.
Oh, yeah. And I've heard that. Oh, my goodness. I don't know which one of the local magazines or news publications I read it in, but there was a lady talking about that she was being interviewed, talking about making the transition from military to civilian life permanently, and that it was hard and it was scary. Came out again and again. And this is a woman who worked with Comanche helicopters. And I believe she made sure that the right parts were available for it being repaired or, brought up to snuff and everything. But it was so scary, as if being dropped into parachuting into a different culture and being told, this is it. From now on, you need to learn how to blend with the natives. And you're supposed to like enjoy it or find something that you did before. You're supposed to have a thriving life. And, it just, and I just think, oh my goodness. And she said, yes, we got help from the military. We got help from the community. And I just got this feeling that there was, but still just trying stuff out. And you said, learn what you want to be when you grow up.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It is a transition. I mean, for one thing, you got to go from knowing every day what you're going to wear to building a wardrobe. I mean, it's small, but that's a small thing. I mean, I didn't even have a jacket when I first got out because I always wore my uniform. I didn't need one. But now I have, some that I've collected and bought over time. And and so for me, especially with the transition being kind of unplanned, I had to figure out, what my next step was going to be. And, and that is difficult. And fortunately, there is a lot of resources out there for veterans as they transition and things to make it easier. Even here in Waco, I've partnered with a couple of other veteran businesses, and we've started doing transition briefs to help veterans with finances, home loans, and career assistance as well as they transition. And we're actually working on that here in Waco, and that's just one example of, across the country, there's people that are, helping veterans out and everything. So that's always great to see.
Well, we will get together because there's a couple of different things. Plus, Scott was in the Air Force before we got married. So we have plenty there. Craig, you have more information rolling around inside of your brain through all this. And
Sure.
you are in beautiful Michigan, which now, because we talked before the show, because we both got in like 15, 20 minutes early. And you just make me want to come and be on the white sand of Lake Michigan and come and stay a few nights in a little log cabin along one of the rivers or something and go, Michigan, it isn't just a commercial.
No, it's
on
actually a real place.
TV.
And it's
Where
very
in
much
Michigan,
like
Craig?
that. What's that?
Where are you at in Michigan, Craig?
We're in Muskegon, so we're over on the
Okay.
lake shore.
Yeah, I was stationed in Detroit for
Oh,
a couple of
fantastic.
years. Yeah.
Yep.
So
I used to be a resident of Detroit for a number of years, and actually I grew up over here, so I ended up moving back over here when I became an adult. But I'd love to weigh in on something you all were speaking about with as far as like your goals and love, and can you love something? That's actually a long discussion that me and one of my mentors have been in debating. Right? He's of the mind of you can't love a thing, and I'm of the mind as well. Heck, yes, you can. And we, it's ironic because his research, Dr. Messi's research, was in the sharing of information. So when we detect something novel, new, or unique, the brain rewards ourselves. You get a little dopamine reward, serotonin reward. So and it's basically anything you detect that any incongruity, brain rewards itself. It makes sense. If we spend all of our cognitive load on everything, we'd go crazy. We can't. So we basically focus on that which is important. So, going back to the time in the old Serengeti and the grasslands, or hunter-gatherers walking around, and it was very important for us to understand the environment and to communicate with one another. So instead of, relaying all the information, we just relay that which was important. So, for example, it might be something like, we're walking along and in a small group, Christine, Ansel, and I, and you're seeing things that are like grass, 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 lion, grass, grass, grass. Well, therein you have, an incongruity, and you've detected it. That would be very important to tell the rest of the group. And so this is kind of forms the basis of this type of system. So in the brain, there is a binary system. It's on or off. It's either you are euphoric, which means you feel those great brain chemicals, or you don't. So it's an on-off switch. It's euphoria or dysphoria, or basically not euphoria is what it's called. So when we detect something, we get a little dopamine release. Meshi found that when we share the information, we get an even bigger dopamine release. So therefore, sharing this information becomes important, and sharing these incongruities, we kind of worked out these emotions to be how they lie on the continuum of like incongruity sharing. So like anger is a detection of malignant incongruity, something that's going to hurt you. Right. And then we'll jump forward to love. Love and joy is an interesting one. And I hate to be an anti-romantic, but according to neuroscience, it's literally like all of your goals aligning. You have no dysphoria. So, you can very much love something, an inanimate object, if it does help you achieve those goals. So, yes, you can have an affinity. We call it more of an affinity than love, an affinity towards money, because it helps you to achieve these goals. Like, for instance, I have a goal that I want people to think that I'm successful. So, part of my signaling may be things that would, signal that I am successful. Maybe, more of my goal is to have, marry a very attractive, spouse, in which case, you do, and then that becomes fulfillment of some of your goals. And so it's not very romantic or more clinical, but really that's what we see, is that if your goals align, euphoria commences and you're happy.
Wow. So expressing that in language, it's like you align all my goals with you. I am not experiencing any dysphoria. And it's like, wow, are you going to get down on one knee and give me a ring?
I'm going to try that later. See if it works.
I love it. You talk science. I love it. Oh my goodness. So I was thinking of Wilson, the ball with the stuff sticking out of it. Have you
Yep.
both seen Tom Hanks?
Castaway.
Castaway, thank you.
Yeah.
And Citizen Kane, what was the one thing, whatever his childhood looked just awful. I wish I could come up with a better descriptor. It was not idyllic. It was loveless, like a loveless childhood. But he had Rosebud. He had the sled. That was his motorcycle, his muscle car, his attractive significant other that established, he's the kid with the really fast sled or the best sled, or whatever it is. And there would be other ones where it was just that thing that aligned to their goals, and there was no dysphoria. This is bleak. My husband says he had a bleak childhood, Citizen Kane, as a
Did.
Yeah, it was definitely. I mean, Agnes Moorehead doing what Agnes did, just looking like, I don't care and nothing matters, and just, like, ugh. So, yeah. And things, yeah. My goodness, I need to quit so that each of you has an opportunity to just say, Craig will have you talk about vernai.com and aihuman.live. What are we going to find at Craig or what do you want us to find? Craig at vernai.com, and then we'll end up with Ansel.
Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. It's been wonderful to meet you, Ansel. It's been great to talk with you as well. I'm sure this is the beginning of many other conversations. Thank you for the work you do. I think it's awesome, and this is a topic obviously that's very near and dear to our hearts. Vern AI is motion recognition. You can find us at the website, find out some of who we work with, what we do, how you can use us in just about any use case possible. AI Human Live is where we're having full 3D avatars, photoreal that can act in real time. So it's like chatbot, but taken to the next level.
Wow. Wow. I really wonder what would happen if everyone dumped everything in of me, all the imagery, all the things that I've written, comments, etc. I almost never hit the comment that's there. I've got to just express myself and have AI just have this little trail of smoke going up, going, she doesn't fit anywhere. There isn't anything about her that we can, but they would definitely have my hands moving. That is always a thing with me. Okay. Ansel, Steward's Life, I believe it's very important to put in the word the Steward's Life on both your book and .com. So your website.
Yes, ma'am.
And then we've got some other stuff down there. Go ahead and tell us about that.
Okay. Oh, that's just my email. But one thing real quick, if I have a moment, Vern, I went to your website, before this and tested out some of the AIs, and, I tried talking angrily. I tried talking sad, and they did respond like very well. It was pretty neat to see. So that's I definitely encourage anyone that's watching this to go there and check it out, because it's definitely fun. And interesting to see how the algorithm can kind of mirror and do empathy, in a way. But the stewardslife.com is my website. There's links to buy my book. My book is available on Amazon. So if you go to stewardslife.com, you'll see the link to buy the book. I do a little bit of talking on there. Like I said, I feel like the stewardship message is much more than just a financial piece. That's kind of like one corner of it. So I put articles out on there, blog posts every so often. You can subscribe, get my new blog posts as I put them out. I plan to post one later today about my daughter, actually. And so, hopefully you find those entertaining and enriching. And you can purchase a book there, and of course, find out information on, when I'm going to be putting out more stuff. And there's also links on there for speaking engagements. If anyone would be interested in having a speaker, I have a link there. You can buy the book from the website, and of course, read the blog entries as well, and just continue to learn more about stewardship.
And I'm simply going to say thank you. Have a very good week. I get to be busy with some very unusual things, including setting up a Christmas tree, but that's another conversation. Bye, Ansel. Bye, Craig.
Thank you.